we had a mediocre marriage and a mediocre connection. And I don't know, man. I mean, things really started to turn around in our relationship when I started doing this work. And what I'll tell you, man, is I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about this yesterday because I really love what I do, and I've been doing Dad Edge, since 2015. And I left a really lucrative career I worked my way all the way up to executive level management and medical device sales. And I left that career to do this full time. And sometimes, like every now and again, it kind of gets in your head. You're like, man, like, did I make the right move? Like that was a lot of money that I passed up, right? That I left behind. And you know what? And then you fast forward to the end of your life, and you really start to look around at the connections you have with your kids, and the fact that your kids, which blows my mind, my boys always want to be here.
Welcome back to the Redbeard Outdoors podcast. I'm Jonathan, your host, and here at Redbeard Outdoors, I talk about faith, family, fitness, and the outdoors. Today, I've got a special guest for you guys. His name is Larry. He's from the Dad Edge podcast and other groups that he has created to help dads be a better version of themselves, enjoy fatherhood even more so, learning from it, learning from others' mistakes so you don't have to make those same mistakes, being a better husband, father, and man in general. So I've been following along with his content for a while, and I've just really enjoyed it. I've taken some tips that I've learned from him, from his stories, his guests that he's had on, and I'm really excited to have him here on the podcast and share this conversation with you guys. So before we get into that, I want to remind you that every Tuesday we've got the Tinkering Tuesday version where I go over either gear or mindset. Every Thursday we have the Why First Form Outdoors edition of the podcast every other Thursday throughout this year, 2024, where people share their stories as to how they got involved with First Form or the First Form community, why they choose First Form Outdoors in their lives as they strive to live happier, healthier, more successful lives and experience more of whatever their goals are. And last but not least, like today on Saturday, full version of the episodes where we got a 1 hour to an hour and a half podcast where we have a conversation that I get to share with you guys, either experts in their field, people that have an amazing story that I want to share, everything in between. But we always have some great guests, just conversations that I want to have and then record and share with you guys as I continue to learn. We can all learn together and grow together. So I'm stoked to bring Larry on here from the Dad Edge podcast. Also, guys, if you're listening into this, I have an amazing giveaway for you guys here in the month of May. Stay tuned for that. The link is down below on how you can get in on that. Also, Instagram is really shutting me down, and that's my main marketing platform, guys, to be able to get out my content to you guys. So with that being said, if you are not able to see my stuff on Instagram or maybe share it with other people, please leave your email down below in the email list. I promise I send one email out a week unless there's some crazy amazing deal that I want you to get in on from one of my partners. It's one email a week. I just give you updates on the podcast, updates on anything that I've got going on so that I can share that with you and reach you as well, because I appreciate everything that you do to help this channel grow. Now let's get into the conversation here with Larry and the Dad Edge podcast. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Redbeard Outdoors podcast. I have a special guest. We've been communicating back and forth for, I want to say it's been a year or a little bit longer. It's been a while. We've been trying to get this one scheduled. We've got Larry. Larry runs a podcast that I ran into because, guys, as a dad, you're always looking for better resources, how you can be a better dad, how you just enjoy life while not getting so frustrated with your kids, and realizing that you're not the only person that's dealing with a lot of the circumstances that you deal with as a dad. And so I found the Dad Edge podcast. Larry runs that. He also has the Dad Edge Alliance, and just provides some great stories. He's got a very interesting backstory himself that we'll get into. And he's, constantly trying to be a better dad himself. So we're going to get into that today, guys. I'm really excited to have Larry on today. But Larry, for people that don't know who you are, give a brief in a nutshell. Who are you?
Oh man, well, it's good to be here. And I love the name of your podcast, by the way, and what you're doing. Like that's super cool, man. And I don't know why you call it the Redbeard though. I just that one confuses me a bit.
Not a lot of creativity behind that one, guys.
No, man, I'm the father of 4 boys, and they are 17, soon to be 18, and 16, 10, and 8. And my house is crazy. It's got a lot of energy. I joke around. I did a speaking event actually on Friday, and I had somebody in the audience ask me, like, "What's it like raising 4 boys?" I was like, "Well, it's like a fraternity house where everybody's drunk and nobody sleeps and nobody wants to leave. That's my house. That's the energy." But
That's a great
I
way to
love
put
it,
it.
man. I do. I love it though. I love the chaos. I love the energy. You know what actually creeps me out more than anything is silence. Like when my house is quiet, I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. It just feels weird, man. But that's me in a nutshell as a father. As far as my wife, we're gonna celebrate 21 years of marriage this year. I can't even believe we've made it that long because of me. Because like I joke with her, I was like, the only reason we're still married is because you're such a forgiving woman. Now I was like, because if you looked at the first 10 years, like on paper and where we were headed, we probably weren't in the best spot. And we had a mediocre marriage and a mediocre connection. And I don't know, man. I mean, things really started to turn around in our relationship when I started doing this work. And what I'll tell you, man, is I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about this yesterday because I really love what I do, and I've been doing Dad Edge, since 2015. And I left a really lucrative career I worked my way all the way up to executive level management and medical device sales. And I left that career to do this full time. And sometimes, like every now and again, it kind of gets in your head. You're like, man, like, did I make the right move? Like that was a lot of money that I passed up, right? That I left behind. And you know what? And then you fast forward to the end of your life, and you really start to look around at the connections you have with your kids, and the fact that your kids, which blows my mind. My boys always want to be here. They always want to be home. And I'm like, my God, like, I don't know what the heck we're doing right, but I guess we got to do something right because they always want to be here and they always want to have their friends here. They always they're like homebodies, which I'm shocked. I never wanted to be home when I was their age. And this relationship that I have with Jess, and one thing I can tell you is it was just this really cool moment that I had yesterday. And I'm like, you know what? There's not enough money on the planet that I would want or need, because all of our needs, all of our wants, and all of our comforts are taken care of. And I get to do the work that's amazing. And at the end of the day, at the end of my life, if I can say this was one of the reasons I was able to build such a connection with my kids, my wife, then I'll do it all day long. And that's it, man.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and guys, first of all, congratulations on 21 years. We're actually coming up on 10 years. Probably by the time this goes out, we might even be in Italy, but I'm taking my wife to Italy
Dang.
for our 10-year. I have a 9 to 5, so I ended up winning the trip this last year because in my head it was either win the Italy trip or have to pay for a trip to Scotland for our 10-year. I'm like, I'm gonna win the trip. That's what I'm gonna do. So yeah, by the time this comes out, we'll probably be in Italy or have maybe even already come back. But with that being said, 10 years, they say at the 10-year mark, the divorce rate drops drastically. I'm sure at the 21-year mark, you're definitely looking at her like, you're stuck with me now, right? That's what my wife always says to me. She's like, you're stuck with me once we hit our 10-year. You sure you don't want to change your mind? Like, but yeah, I feel you, man. It's, my wife's been through a lot. And I'd say some of it has to do with me. If not a lot of it has to do with my fault. But it's a constant evolution in the fact that, again, that communication is there. It's definitely a big deal when you're raising kids. And she had a couple kids from a previous marriage when we got married. And so we never really got that honeymoon phase, that just me and her get to figure each other out kind of deal. It was instant dad and that kind of connection. And so we've been filling that out for the last 10 years of how are we still learning each other. I've been evolving because I was young when we got married. I was, 20, was it 21, 22. And so she's now seeing a 10-year difference in me. She's like, now you're wearing Crocs and you're doing this other stuff. That's not what I married, like, but anyway, long story short, congratulations on 21 years. That's a huge deal. And there's a lot to be said about that and a lot that you guys have learned. So I'm excited for people that haven't checked out your podcast, especially the dads out there and us guys out there, we're terrible at communication naturally. And so Larry's got a lot of good tips and pointers about more than just being a dad, but also being that loving husband and being able to communicate with your wife on that same level. So you are on the same page. You guys back each other up and create such a wonderful experience. So your kids are homebodies, but not because of video games, but because they want to be at home. They want to bring their friends to your house. They don't want to leave. And so that's amazing. That's a great accomplishment there. Congratulations on that, Larry.
Oh, thanks, brother.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I fall on my face every day. Like yeah. I mean, I was putting my 10-year-old to bed. Like this was 2 nights ago. And there's there are times, right? I mean, I view myself as a father who has a good balance of compassion, empathy, but I'm also getting your face a little bit. I'll be direct, but usually like even with my older boys, so my oldest son wrestles, right? And it's so funny, man. He is such a unique individual. And he's a band kid as well. He plays in the marching band. He plays saxophone. He's so musically talented. And the stereotype at his high school, which I think is probably the stereotype elsewhere, but I'm not saying it's everywhere, is that at his high school, the band kids don't do sports, they do band, right? And when he told us, he wrestled Little League when he was like tiny, like 7, 8, 9 years old, and he hated it, like just absolutely despised it. And but he finished out each season, and then he'd want to come back the next season, which always kind of blew my mind, but he did it. And but then in sophomore year of high school, which was just last year, he was like, I'm going to go out for the wrestling team. And we were like, wow, really? Like, I remember when you were 9, you hated it. He's like, yeah. He's like, to be honest, like, I just want to be in better physical shape. He was already in decent shape. And he's like, and I just want to learn life skills. I want to be more resilient. I want to be able to make quicker decisions. I want to work out more, like that kind of thing. He's like, that's why I want to wrestle. I'm like, man, that's a great reason, right? So he's the only kid who actually does band and wrestling, which here's the funny thing about that too. He expected the wrestlers to kind of like pick on him. And all the wrestlers were like, dude, you play saxophone and wrestle? Bro, that's awesome, right? He's like, Dad, the band kids are who turned on me. They're the ones who were making fun of me. Like they're giving me crap, like thinking like, you're like, oh, you're a wrestler now. You're not a band. Like anyway, but so my son will, I'm very compassionate. I'm very empathetic, very approachable, and I talk to my kids a lot, and they'll tell you that. And my son, every now and again, like he got in this sort of like, I don't know, this month or whatever, where he was wrestling and he just couldn't get his head right. He would just pace. He looked terrified and nervous before he'd go out there. And like, literally you could see it written all over his face. He was beaten before he would get out there. Dang. And you could see it, and like his opponents would see it. And so like, I'm normally like, hey man, like, what'd you learn? Like, you'll get them next time. Like, I don't coddle them, but then like one day, this was like right when this started to happen, I was like, hey man, permission to speak very direct. And he's like, okay, I'm ready for it. I was like, dude, you are defeated before you even get out there. It's written all over your face. It's written in your eyes, your body language. Like, you are defeated before you go out there, and you are literally telegraphing that defeat to your opponent. And it is like blood in the water to a shark. That guy knows he has you. Like, Ethan, I've seen you wrestle the past 4 or 5 times, and it's always the same thing. I was like, what would it look like if instead of being so, he's like, I'm just so nervous. I'm nervous I'm going to get killed. I'm nervous, like, not killed, but like, I'm nervous, like, I'm just going to get my butt kicked out there and like this and that. I was like, what if you weren't nervous about winning or losing? What if you just focused on getting the next point? Like getting that next takedown, getting the next reversal. Like, literally, who cares if you win or lose? But like, what if you just focused on the points? Because the guy who has the most points is the guy who's going to win. Like, whether you pin him or not. I was like, so what if you just kind of didn't give a shit about the result, and all you cared about was getting that next point? And all of a sudden you just saw like that. And dude, he went 12-1 for the rest of the season. Wow. So like, he, out of his last 13 matches, he won 12 of them. And that was the switch. So with my 10-year-old, I'm putting him to sleep the other night. And he's playing flag football, and I'm really trying to help him with snapping the ball because he's a center, and I'm working on passing with him because he wants to pass and catching. He's having a hard time catching the ball. So like with him the other day, I was like, dude, you have to, when you catch the ball, you have to grip it with both hands and squeeze it and pull it in, because he does this thing where he pops it and then the ball goes off and he doesn't grab it. And I'm like, dude, you got to grab the ball. And I put him to bed that night, and I noticed he was a bit off, and I'm like, you all right? And he's like, you really, to be honest, like, you really hurt my feelings. You kind of have been for a while. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, just the way you talk to me, like when we're throwing the ball around and playing football. He's like, I love playing football with you, but like, I'm starting to not, because like, I feel like when I'm around you, I'm a bad player. And I was like, oh my God, dude. I was like, no. I was like, you know what, Lawson? I was like, I'm sorry, man. I was like, you know, sometimes I muddy the waters between being dad and coach. And I know sometimes I talk to your older brothers like that, but they're a bit more like, we've have that relationship and they appreciate it. And I know that we don't yet. And I was like, you know what? That is a huge point, and I'm going to fix that. So when I am helping you, and when I am, you know, coaching you, I'm going to work with you instead of at you. Right. And, but that's a tough lesson. But I think as dads, man, like 4 boys, been a dad for almost 18 years, but dude, I still face plant. Even though I run this podcast, you'd think I know better. I don't. Sometimes I'm an idiot. So yeah, we're always learning here, man. Always.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like the fact that you're willing to recognize and not be prideful about it. Like, you know, the dads out there, and myself included, it can be hard sometimes to allow your kids to call you out on stuff, because you don't want to be called out on things. That's just, again, going back to, you know, men, we're not naturally good at communicating, but we're also kind of ego driven if we don't keep that ego in check. And having your 10-year-old, or, you know, in my case, 8-year-old, or sometimes my 7-year-old, you know, she'll do the same thing. And man, I'm telling you, if you had girls, oh, they get you wrapped around the finger. So that one's hard. But with boys, even like, you try to impose things on your boys that maybe were imposed on you. Maybe you react a certain way. I know, like for me, I really enjoy the kind of send your eyebrows in your face. I don't necessarily enjoy it, but that kind of coaching, that kind of like motivation, that gets me going. I have 2 boys, my older ones, that don't react well to that. And I've had to change how I talk to them about it. You know, they're competitive in their own way, but then I've got my youngest who is competitive about everything. Everything is a competition. Going up the stairs, getting in the car first, who sits in what seat, you know, everything is a competition for him. So being able to cater that, I think it's a big learning point, and it's constantly evolving. So you know, I don't know if you'll ever be perfect at it. Hopefully one day, but
Never.
you know, it just because you run a podcast, you're what you're doing is you're providing that help to people that are maybe 10 years behind you, 15 years, or just starting at being a dad. They're the full, you know, 20 something years behind you in their marriage, just getting started. They're getting to learn from you, just like your kids are getting to learn from you. And so definitely, I definitely don't go into podcasts thinking people are experts unless it's like a Huberman or a, you know, a Peterson or something like that.
Yeah.
But you know, they made a good point the other day, bringing Peterson up. He talked about Joe Rogan. And I feel like there's different types of podcasters that are successful, and you obviously run a very successful podcast, but you seem to err on the side more of, he called Joe Rogan a bloodhound, or and not an intellectual, because he didn't go out and like study it book smart wise, but he goes out and has thousands of conversations with people and searches out that information. So he gathers his information that way through experience and through you know, through conversation, rather than reading it in a book and then applying it. Like, again, Huberman and Peterson stand out to me because I listen to their stuff quite a bit, but they're definitely intellectuals. They go out and they study the books and then go and apply it to real life, whereas I feel like I err on more learning with my hands, talking with people, having those conversations, and then getting to share that information with others. And I know that's what I've appreciated about your podcast. I don't feel like I'm dumb when I listen to your podcast, I feel like it's having a conversation with you rather than listening to a professor speak, you know? So I definitely appreciate that.
That means a lot to me that you say that, because that's why I started the podcast. And that's, I'm almost a decade into this, and that is my absolute continued attitude. It has never once changed. And let me explain that. When I first wanted to start a podcast, I was terrified. And I had this really great mentor of mine. He's like, "Why are you so scared?" I was like, "Cause I don't know a lot about this topic." He goes, "That's exactly why you should do it." And I'm like, "But I'm going to look like an idiot. Like, aren't people who are doing this, like, aren't they gurus?" He's like, "There's two types of leaders. There's two types of podcasters, right? There's the podcasters who, like Huberman and Peterson, like they are brilliant, right? They are the expert. And then there are the podcast hosts who are the student. And the student you as the host, you have a front row seat to one of the most amazing educations possible. All you have to do is provide the platform where you're learning and then make it accessible to others. That's your attitude." And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can get my arm wrapped around that one all day long. And that has never changed. And one thing I'll tell you, after doing this now for a decade and almost 1,200 episodes in, I know a thing or two more than when I first got started. Absolutely. Right. But I will never, ever call myself the guru. I will never call myself the expert, because I just got off of a podcast with Stephen Robertson, and it was one of the most enlightening educational conversations I've had in almost 1,200 episodes. I couldn't get enough of what this guy was saying, because it was brilliant. And I was like, I'm constantly I will never, I can't ever say never, but I can never see myself not podcasting in this organization, this business, and in what I'm doing. Podcasting is my favorite, because I love to learn. And I think if you can be that person, right, that bloodhound, like that Rogan is, right? It's just like, I just want to learn from people who are way smarter than me. And then whoever wants to follow me in the audience can do so. But that doesn't immune me from making mistakes. Like, in fact, the funny thing is it makes you more aware of your mistakes. Like, it almost puts like a magnifying glass on it, because you know what good looks like, and you know what not so good looks like, right? a lot of people out there, and I'm not just saying men in general or dads in general, but they don't know what they don't know. And we'll kind of just put our head in the sand and we'll hope for the best. I don't really know if I'm making mistakes. I don't really know if I am or not. And sometimes we make the mistakes that we make, we don't know we even made them until it's too late. So the one cool thing about like you hosting your podcast and me hosting mine is that I think one of the greatest gifts that I've gotten from my podcast is being able to identify potential problems down the road that I could easily step into, that I could be like, "Oh, I remember that guest talked about this. I see that one coming. Like I'm gonna deviate around this one, right? Or I'm gonna make it better. Or I'm gonna do something different." So it's been an incredible experience.
Oh yeah. And I love that. Yeah, it's more about being a student. I like asking questions, and
Same.
I love when I get off a podcast and I've had someone on there like, I've never been asked this question before, and you asked that question. It was a good conversation because of that. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. I love it. Like what a guest tells you that, like, that's an awesome question. I've never been asked. I'm like, yes, cool. That's what I want to hear.
All right. We can end it there. We are good. No, but that's it's so true, and being a student, again, you're saying you've been doing this for 10 years, over 1,200 episodes. And so that's a lot of dedication. It's a lot of time. And you started it, you said the first 10 years of your marriage were kind of not headed in the direction that they are obviously now, which means that just tells me, doing a little bit of simple math, I'm not the best mathematician, but you started the podcast and the Dad Edge Alliance and the Dad Edge podcast all around the same time that you were making that transition to become a better version of yourself. So that makes it even harder. You didn't start at the top of your game where you're like, all right, I've crushed these 10 years of marriage. I'm awesome. I'm going to start a podcast. Now, it was kind of the opposite, where you weren't necessarily bottom of the barrel, but you were kind of like, oh man, like shifting through things and figuring that out. So for people out there that are maybe in that position, kind of speak to that a little bit. How did you make that big shift from making all this money, executive level position, to starting a podcast and working on your marriage and your kids? How did that all come to come to fruition?
It's a great question. What I can tell you, so those two worlds were actually they were going on at the same time. So I was actually working full time as I was doing the podcast. I never meant for Dad Edge to be my full time gig ever. Like I actually just wanted to podcast because I just wanted to learn, and that was it. And it didn't actually start as far as like an organization or even a coaching business until I joined my first mastermind back in 2015. I never knew what a mastermind was, and I didn't know what group coaching was. And I had a mentor of mine that I deeply respected, and he had a platform for Christian businessmen who were married and wanted to basically elevate their business and their life and their marriages and their kids and all that. And I've never experienced anything quite like it. And I remember at first, like, what is a mastermind? It just sounds really weird. And then I was a part of it. Dude, this mastermind was $500 a month. And I was like, $500 a month? I was like, what in God's name? Like, is this like snake oil or what is this? And I'll never forget the mentor that I really, really respected. And he was ahead of me in age. And he's like, I think you should come and join our mastermind. And I'm like, well, what is it all about? He's like, well, every Monday morning at 10 a.m., you'll be in a virtual room with 10 other men. And it's led by me and one of my other coaches. And we're going to help you in these areas. We're going to help you with physical health, emotional health, mental health, the health of your marriage, the health of your business, the connection with your kids, everything. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, how much is that? And he's like, $500. I was like, $500 a month. He's like, yeah, $500 a month. I was like, dude, what? That's a lot, man. That's a cost a lot of money, man. I don't have $500 just a month. Like, how am I even going to justify that to Jessica? I just joined a mastermind. She's gonna ask me what the heck a mastermind even is. And he goes, yeah. And he just stood toe to toe with me. And he goes, yeah, it will. And it not only will cost you $500 a month, it's going to cost you an hour of your time minimum a week to do this. He's like, but the ROI is significant. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think I'm going to pass. He's like, okay. He's like, no problem. He goes, well, I'll tell you what. He goes, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you're focusing on how much this will cost you financially. You're not thinking about other costs. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, I want you to think about your life and the Dad Edge, because at the time the Dad Edge was just a podcast. He's like, I want you to think about your mission to serve fathers, to serve husbands. I want you to think about your marriage. I want you to think about the patience and connection you have with your kids. And I want you to fast forward your life 1 year from today, and you don't do anything different. Nothing. Where's your business going to be? Where's your marriage going to be? Are you fully connected to your kids? Everything that you want? Where's that life? What does that life look like? And he goes, I want you to think about it. And he goes, let me tell you something. And he's ahead of me in years. I think Aaron is like 65 now. And he's like, Larry, one thing I can tell you that I'll always tell the younger generation is this. There's a cost to doing things, but usually there's a greater cost to not doing something. And he goes, call me back in 24 hours. And I looked at the clock and it was 10 a.m. when I was talking to him. I called him back at 10:11. 11 minutes later, and I said, I'm in. I had no idea. I was like, what did I just say yes to? And I was like, I'll stay a few months. I stayed for a year. And it was the best thing I've ever done in my life, because I was in a room with men who were smarter than me, had better relationships with their wives than me, had better connections with their kids than me, had a more successful business than me. And I could not get enough of learning from those guys. And that was a game changer. And again, I never expected anything to happen out of it, but that's when I started Dad Edge Alliance, was in 2016, which is our mastermind. And I honestly, man, I expected it to grow to like, I was like, oh, if we get 100 guys, like, because our mastermind isn't expensive. It's not $500 a month. It's $97 a month. I was like, if we get 100 guys, man, that'd be like really, really cool. Well, now we're at 800 guys. And that's in one program. Then we have another program called the Dad Edge Boardroom for business owners. And we have 60 guys in that one. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I would have never thought in a million years, man, we'd be doing this work. And seeing the guys, most importantly, the guys who do life with us, the things that are happening in their lives, like their marriages, their kids, their health, like their businesses. It's been unreal. But that was one of the biggest turning points for me, was getting into a room with people smarter than me. Like, hands down, I couldn't get enough of it. But, you know, I didn't leave my full-time job until 2021, so almost 3 years ago. And it just got up to the point where I was just like, this is doing so well and I love it so much. And my full-time job, even though it paid well, I hated it. And I was like, I think I'm going to give this a shot. And I did. And man, it's been phenomenal. But going back to what you were talking about with marriage, you're a hunter, right? Yeah. So I didn't grow up. You and I were talking about this before we hit record. I did not grow up with a father. I'm happy to talk about my background if you want to hear about it. But I didn't really grow up with a father. I had no one mentoring me. I did have an amazing grandpa that taught me how to fish, but he didn't hunt, but he taught me how to fish. I love to fish, but I didn't know how to hunt. There's a lot of things from a man, quote unquote, man perspective that I don't know how to do. I don't know how to fix stuff. Thank you, YouTube, for that one though. I can pretty much fix anything if I can find the video on YouTube.
University.
That's right, man. But I've always told, when I first became a father of boys, I was like, oh, dude, like, what am I going to, I don't know how to hunt. I don't know how to fix things. I don't know how to like put up drywall. I don't know how to do a lot of things. I don't know how to fix a car. And one thing I've always told my boys is, if you ever want to do something that I don't know how to do, we'll go learn it together. And I told you a story of my son, my 16-year-old wanted to learn how to hunt. And I was like, cool, I'll find us a place. I've never hunted. We'll go. And we did. But here's what I can tell you. Marriage, communication, connection, intimacy, all these things that we as men, and you even mentioned it, you're like, we suck at it, right? I don't necessarily know if we suck at it. I mean, some of us do, but here's the gap. We're never taught. It's a lot like me. It's like, I could go out with a rifle with my son and guess that might not work out too well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, number one, I mean, not to say we're get hurt, but we might not shoot, like 21 quail and 3 pheasant like we did on the hunt that I took them on, which was awesome. It might just be like floundering, winging it. Neither one of us know what the hell we're doing, which actually takes the fun out of it, in my opinion. To some degree, you can be exploratory with it, adventurous, but you want to go out there and you want to get something. So when it comes to marriage, when it comes to communication, connection, intimacy, conflict resolution, all of these things that make a marriage work, it's no different. The skills are actually the same. Just as I can learn how to hunt if I've never done it, well, I can learn how to communicate with my wife. I can learn how to have conflict resolution, intimacy, connection, everything that makes our marriage work, even though no one sat me down and taught me how to do it, which, by the way, is most of us, but you can learn it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why I say naturally we suck at it. Because, a lot of the times that I've noticed anyway, men like to fix things. And there's that funny video where she's got the nail sticking out of her forehead. Everyone knows this video, it's like, it's not the nail. And he's like, I just want to pull it out. That would fix everything. She's like, that's not it. And we laugh because, I'll go into fix it mode. My wife's like, it's not the nail. I'm like,
it's not the nail.
Like, that's my cue to like back up, listen, but it's just kind of naturally how we are. And so you can definitely learn, and it's good to learn. And then of course, pass those skills on to your kids. I always joke that my wife's the financial mind of the family. She went through, growing up with constant, basically bounce checks and a bunch of other stuff going on that she recognized as a kid, and it caused her stress. And now she's like on the other end where she's super financially just like dialed in. And me, I'm like, oh, we'll make enough money to make it happen. She's like, what do you mean? Well, like, and that's kind of how I am. Right. And so I never had those discussions with my parents necessarily. And so those are the things that we're learning together. And then, of course, passing on to the kids. You get a job, go ahead and sign up for the 401k match, stuff like that I never really knew about and learned about it kind of at a later age. And so
all of that to be said, like there's always a constant progression. Don't become that person that clocks out on the way home, picks up some fast food for you and your wife or whatever, sits on the couch and watches a show and considers that intimacy with your spouse or your kids. You have a shared, TV show, whatever. That's not intimacy, right? That's coasting through things. And I love what you said. Like, if you don't know how to do it, your kids will come to you and say, hey, I want to learn this. You don't know how to do it. You guys go learn together. And you go through the stresses, learn how to deal with those stresses of learning something, or even like booking a hunt, things like that. You're able to show the kids, obviously at their appropriate age level, but show them, hey, this is what it takes to go on a hunt. This is what I took to book it, et cetera. And then you go through and have someone teaching you and coaching you. That also takes removing the ego out of, well, I'm dad, so I know everything, because that's not true. And I very rarely ever tell my kids it's because I said so, unless it's go get in the car now because we're in a rush. I'll explain it to you later. Outside of that, I'd try to avoid at all costs because I said so, or because I'm dad, or whatever. There's always communication there. And so I love that you talk about that you teach that, and you've obviously created a space where your kids feel comfortable coming and talking to you. So give us a brief I guess rundown of where you're coming from, why this was a learned, like you didn't grow up in a household where you had a dad that taught you all these things and how to be good at communicating and how to push the ego out of the way and be a better man and constantly progress. Kind of give us a brief rundown of where you came from and then why you decided to create what you have now, which is the Dad Edge Alliance, 800 members deep. And then of course the other one that you mentioned, the boardroom, where you have another 60 members. And then of course the podcast is doing awesome. So kind of bring us through that transition a little bit there.
Sure. I think, the Dad Edge probably really started when I was a kid, because, and I wanted a dad so bad. And to be quite honest, like I kind of did, but he was my grandpa and he lived a mile away. He wasn't my dad, but he was the most tremendous, amazing father figure that I could have ever asked for. He taught me a lot of really cool things, taught me how to fix a few things, and I was always working with him outside. I mean, everyone always called me his shadow because I just wanted to be wherever he was at. And he would, like I said, taught me how to fish. But one really cool thing he taught me was how to love your wife. My grandpa was a blue collar man's man, like tough dude, but also very compassionate.
All right, guys, brief interruption here. Just wanted to give you a reminder of a couple of things that we have going on right now. First, one of the partners of the show is All In Digiscoping. We've got a amazing sale going on right now. The link will be down below so you can save some money on getting the best footage possible out of your spotting scope, your binoculars, and many other options that All In has available. You're going to get the best deals possible right now. Again, gearing up for that hunt season so you can get the best footage, best pictures of animals that you're scouting, animals that you're hunting, and that you can share later and tell that story to your friends, family at home, and enjoy that for many years to come. Also, of course, First Form, one of the longest partners of the show, amazing products. Not only the products though, guys, there's an app where you can get a one-on-one advisor, not some cookie cutter program, a one-on-one advisor, a multitude of different types of workouts with substitutions if you need them, etc., for your needs and what you're wanting to train for. Again, going over that with your one-on-one advisor that will help you with your nutrition and your fitness, getting you on the road to where you want to go. That is less than $13 a month, guys. You're not going to find that anywhere else, I promise. And if you do, shoot me an email, shoot me a message. I'd be more than happy to hear about it, because I'm telling you, this app is fantastic. And for less than $13 a month, you definitely want to take advantage of that if you want to better your health at all. With that being said, guys, thank you so much. Let's get back to this conversation with Larry.
Very empathetic. And he was like, when people would see him walk into a room, they would light up, because he just had so much genuine charisma. And he always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room, because he was genuinely curious about everybody. And he would look you right in the eye and talk to you, no matter if there was 10 people in the room or 100 people in the room. And but he was such a cool example, and I spent a lot of time with him growing up. But, my mom and biological father, they got married in 71, and my mom was only like 21 years old, and so was he. They got married really young, and it sounds like so did you. And but they got divorced 4 years later, and when I was only, I think, like 9 months old, I was a baby, and then like I have no recollection of my dad. He left shortly thereafter, and I have no recollection of my dad. My mom and I, it was just me and her for 4 years. And dude, I actually remember being in preschool. Like I remember like vividly being in preschool, and I remember my friends and their dad would pick them up from school. And I knew what a dad was, and I just knew I didn't have one, but it wasn't like a pity thing. I was just like, I just don't have one. I guess my mom will find one, right? That's what I thought. Moms go out and find dads. And my mom was dating this guy, and I didn't even know it. But one day when I was 4, she's like, "Hey, I'm having a very special friend over for dinner tonight, and I want you to meet him. I'm really excited for you to meet him." And I was like, "Him?" I was like, "What?" And I'd never seen a dude even walk in our house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget this guy walking in our house. It was wintertime. He was wearing a trench coat and a 3-piece suit and a double Windsor tie and feathered hair and a handlebar mustache, briefcase. He was a white collar data software engineer. And when this guy walked in my house, he shook my hand. He's like, "Hey, Larry, it's nice to meet you. I'm Joe." The very first thing I said to this guy, I just looked up at him, just like beaming. I was like, "Are you going to be my dad?"
Oh.
And like, literally, that was my first question asking this guy. Like, I literally thought like this was the guy. And I think my mom like gasped, like she kind of like did that. And like, he kind of like awkwardly laughed, but my mom like married him 6 months later. And they were together until I was 10. Every year that they were together, it just got worse and worse and worse. He was a heavy drinker, so was she. They just beat each other up. He beat me up, screaming, yelling. I mean, I could tell you story after story. Cops were called to my house from the neighbors because they heard screaming and yelling, and it was horrible, man. I just didn't like it. When they got divorced when I was 10, I'll never forget my mom calling me from work saying like, "Hey, me and your dad are officially divorced." And at the time he had already moved out, so I hadn't seen him for a long time. And there was a part of me that I felt very relieved. I was like, okay, thank God. Like I don't have to deal with like them fighting or getting beaten up or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I was also like, well, now what? Like this, now what? And 2 years later, I accidentally met my biological father. And there's a whole story that goes along with that. I won't get into it. I had no idea where he was or where he lived, but he lived 3 miles from us. Had no idea. And he was remarried at the time, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And I was so excited, man. Like meeting my biological father, like, and like looking at him, like we kind of like we had similar features, and like I was overjoyed. And I think it was like right around month 5, like things just got weird. And the best way I could describe the weirdness feeling is my dad just kind of like started to get distant, a little bit more shorter with his answers. It just felt like there was like this cloud of stress around him. I'll never forget picking up the phone one day, and I just asked him, I was like, "Hey, is everything okay? Like, what's going on?" Like, I think I asked him somewhere along that. I don't even remember the words. All I know is that was the end of our relationship. And my dad had basically informed me that we were not going to see each other anymore. And that sucked, man. I literally was like, holy shit, like I'm 12. My dad has abandoned me twice now. And my mom married a guy who was my dad, and he's gone. Like, now what? And I started to go down a really bad road, a dark road, where I failed the 8th grade, kind of gave up on school, had to redo 8th grade twice. Went on to I turned everything around, went on to high school, went on to college, met my wonderful wife in college, and then graduated and got into medical device sales. And really, on paper, like I was successful. Yeah. And then the biggest thing happened when I was 30. So I'm 30 years old. This is 18 years ago. I'm sitting in a coffee shop here in St. Louis, and I was there for a business meeting. And I don't know why, but people go in and out of coffee shops all the time. But for some reason, like this dude walks in, and I just sort of like looked over, and I'm like, oh my God, that's my dad. Like my father. I hadn't seen him in 18 years. And I remember one of the women I was with, who I worked with, like we were also friends outside of work. So she knew that story. And she like kind of like did one of these. She's like, hello, are you still here? And I'm like, sorry. I was like, I don't know how to say this. I was like, but my dad just walked in here. And she's like, wait, what? Like your dad? Like the one you haven't seen since you were 12? I'm like, yeah. She's like, where is he? And I go, right there. He's like, I don't know, 50 feet away. And dude, without one word, she just got up, walked over to him, sat at his table. And I was like, what is about to happen? And he just kind of like took a deep breath. Our eyes met. He came over, shook hands, and he was like, hey, yeah. Like, how are you doing? And I'm like, fine.
You're like, that's the question. That's the question you asked me after 18 years. Good night.
I mean, I don't know if I would have done any better. I probably would have. Right. I mean, he was nervous, right? Yeah. So was I. But that interaction now turned into what's almost 19 years of us having a relationship, and he's still married to the same woman. And he's a very successful business owner, entrepreneur, and always has been, just recently retired. And we've had a great relationship. But how Dad Edge got started didn't get started till 6 years after that. My oldest son was 6. My youngest at the time was 4. And I made 3 promises to myself when I became older and married and all that stuff. Number 1, I only wanted to be married 1 time. My mom was married 3. And it was not just marriages, but a constant revolving door of just bums, just drinkers, partiers, abusers. It just got so old. So I want to be married once. Number 2, I'm going to do everything I can to be a good dad. I'm going to figure that one out. And number 3, I'm never going to strike my children in anger. And I can tell you, I broke just about all 3 of those promises. Luckily, we survived marriage, so I didn't have to break promise number 1. But I really wasn't a great father. I wasn't a bad one, but I wasn't a good one. I knew what really bad looked like, and I just knew what not to be really bad at. But I wasn't really being great either. And the 3rd promise was when my 4-year-old stepped out of line one night, and I spanked him. And I never hit my children since, and never before that. And unfortunately, Jonathan, I hit him so hard, not meaning to, but I still did it, that he fell when I hit him. And here's what got me. Right away when I hit him, I was like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do? Because it was a fit of rage. It was just like he did something and just pissed me off, and whack. And then when he fell, I'm like, oh my God. I went to pick him up, and he was on his stomach, and he turned around on his back, and I was going like this in my hands, and he just was like this, like with his hands up, like, please don't hurt me. I'm like, oh my God. And in that moment, what I saw was me. Like, dude, I remember being that kid. I remember like putting my hands up, like, please stop hitting me. And that was it. I was like, screw this. I am not doing this anymore like this. And that's when I literally went on this journey that has now been over 10 years of like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to drop the ego. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm not a mediocre father, but I'm going to be the best damn father I can be. And what I learned along the way was exactly like this. Hunting, right? There are skills that go along with hunting. There are skills that go along with sales, because I was in sales. I was really good at that, but I also learned the skills to do it. And at the time I was doing martial arts, and I loved martial arts. And I was pretty good at it. So I'll wrap it up here. I remember after that episode, and I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to do this. And I literally started thinking about everything in my life that I was somewhat decent at. My job, martial arts, whatever, school. I was like, what is the common denominator? Well, the common denominator is I sit on my rear end, or I'm up and around, but I'm a student. I'm someone who's learning, implementing, growing. Could fatherhood and marriage be the same? Could it? Or are we all just hypnotized that we have to wing it? It's like, well, let me give it a try, because obviously this way is not working. The winging it the way is not working. And then I started learning, reading books, podcasts, going to seminars, even going to therapy. And then I started the podcast, and that's when things really took off, because I got to talk to people who were way smarter than me in their field. And I felt like my mind had exploded in a good way. And then I started implementing these things into my life. And my life got dramatically better. And it wasn't pretty, but that's how everything got started.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I mean, there's a lot to take away from that. And I will tell you that my my 8-year-old, I guess he's my 9-year-old. Yeah, he'll be 10 this year. Goodness. He's the only one that I've ever popped on his butt. And all the other ones, I don't know, there's something about him. I don't know if it's just, but like he and there's been times recently where I can't honestly remember the last time I did it, and I just remember thinking the same thing, like the fact like he's kind of like running away from me with his hands covering his butt. It's like, all right, like this is not good. I need to get better at it. And so there's and I can remember the last time I got spanked as a kid. I remember being in the corner crying and hearing my dad talk to my mom and being like, that's the last, I'll never do that to him again. And I'm the oldest of 5, and I don't remember any of my siblings ever getting spanked. And so I think it's interesting, like all the good dads that I know of anyway have kind of had that moment of like, I need to not be physical with my kids. They need to know that like they should be safe wrestling with me and being physical in that way and finding ways to express emotions and physical emotions in a better way than hitting, and I have those discussions with my kids, and this is something that I think it applies to everyone that has kids that go to school. When your kids come in, it is the most frustrating thing. And I remember as a kid answering my parents this way, but when you ask them, hey, how was your day? And they're like, good. Oh my gosh. Like, and as a parent, you get frustrated. As a kid, you're like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, what do you mean? How was my day? There's a lot of crap that goes on in my day, and so you go with the easy route, and then the parents get frustrated. What I've learned, my wife has taught me this very well. There's always a question that she would ask, and I've picked this up. So definitely wasn't my idea, but I say, what was the favorite part of this class? Or what was your favorite part of recess? Or what, and that's a very specific, so they don't have to go through their entire day with you and hit reset and go through all the crappy and all the good things. They get to pick one thing and you can have a discussion about that. I love doing that, with the kids and them knowing that they can come back and they've got somewhere that they can talk. They can come to you when they've had a rough day. But there's days where my son will come home and, a kid that I thought was his best friend yesterday kicked him today or whatever. And, did something stupid, elementary school kids. And he'll come in and he'll be upset about it. And he'll say, this kid didn't take responsibility. Like he said he didn't do it or whatever, we'll have those discussions. It's very interesting how his brain works. Sounds like you have those discussions as well with your kids where it's very detailed. You have grown-up discussions with them. You're talking with them in more depth than a lot of parents speak with their kids. Why is that? What have you developed over time with your kids, and have you taught, or how you've taught other parents to speak, or dads to speak with their kids as well, that allow you to, I guess, have those open discussions with your boys?
So I I think it's really important to ask high quality questions that are generative in nature, right? And so let me explain what a generative question is. So like your wife, the question of like, tell me about the favorite part of this class today, or tell me your favorite part of recess today, right? That's a generative question. Generative question meaning it generates a memory. It can generate gratitude. It can generate a high point moment memory. But what it will generate is an emotional response, connection, and a story. And when you ask, how was your day? Fine. It doesn't do any of that. You don't even have to have a brain power to say it was
like
fine,
it was a net zero.
It was good,
right? It was good and bad. Yeah. We just net zero. I'm home. I'm safe.
Net zero. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of actually asking my kids 3 questions every day. And I usually do this around bedtime. But what it does is I want to share this with you and your audience, because the heart of how was your day, the intention behind it, it's because a dad wants to know, like, tell me your day, man. Like, it's not how was your day. It's like, I just want to talk to you and I want you to talk to me. That's what that question's about.
Right.
But the problem with that is that if you and I were to go on a hunt and I'm trying to chase a deer down with a knife and I just can't do it, right? Like, that's not a quality hunt. That's not going to work. That's not going to produce be like, man, I'm really excited to hunt. All I want to do is hunt. And you're like, there's a better way.
Yeah.
Like, let me give you this gun, right, with a scope on it. You have more fun. Promise you. You'll get the result you want. So the questions with your kids is no different. Like the question of how was your day is like chasing down that deer with a knife, hoping it'll be enjoyable and the result you want. I won't get it. But so I like to ask my kids 3 questions that are generative in nature, and each one of them have a psychological impact. All of them. I like to call these 3 questions also the marathon of the relationship. And it will determine what your kids will tell you and what they want, how you respond. So I'll explain what number 1. What was the best part of your day, and tell me why it was so meaningful? Now, that is a question. You could rephrase that 100 different ways. Tell me a time today that brought you joy. Tell me a time today that you're proud of, right? Whatever. It doesn't really matter. What I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to stop pattern interrupt my kids, right? For them to like think about their day and to seek and find something that they're proud of, something that they're excited to tell me. Because think about this. The last time you went on a hunt, maybe you got that thing on the back with the horns, and you probably like, holy crap, dude, I got to tell you about this hunt, man. I got, and you just couldn't wait to tell like people when you got back, like you got this thing, right? You just got this on the hunt, right? And which, by the way, what is that over your right shoulder?
So that's an elk.
Okay, it's an elk.
Yeah,
so
it was
you were
my
probably
first
like,
elk. I got it this last year.
See, and when you got that first elk, I mean, we were just like so pumped to tell people, right?
Oh,
yeah. Well, same thing happens when our kids tell something that they're proud of or something that whatever, right? And then how you respond, right? Because I'm a big proponent of matching the energy that they're bringing. So like, for instance, my 10-year-old might be like, Dad, I scored the winning goal in soccer today at recess. I'm like, dude, no way. Are you serious? Yeah. It's like, dude, tell me about it. What happened? Now, I just want him to be excited to tell me, to have that connection with me. And the more interested I am in him, the more interesting he's going to think I am. Right. And I don't do that for that selfish or for the latter part. I do it because I want the connection. I want the conversation with him, because the more conversations we have, the more conversations we're going to have later on in his life.
Yep.
There's going to come a time when our kids they're going to make a choice to choose to have, how much are they going to have us in their life? And they're going to think about all the conversations and experiences they had with us. And so that's number 1, is finding the gratitude or the happiness or the pride or something like that in the day, matching that energy, and telling, sharing with them, labeling that emotion like, dude, you must have felt on top of the world. Are you kidding me? Like, tell me more about that. What I want to know play by play how that happened. Right. So that's question number 1. Question number 2, this one's tricky. You really got to follow this one well. But if you want your kid at the age of 17 to call you at 3:00 in the morning when they've decided tonight is the night I'm going to have 8 beers for the first time ever. And then I need to make a decision of whether or not I'm going to get behind the wheel or I'm going to call my dad for a ride home. And depending on the conversations and the interactions and the connection you have with your dad is going to determine whether or not that kid's going to call you or not.
Yep.
So I want my kids to make that phone call because I've created what's called an environment of psychological safety. I'm not saying that's the absence of consequences. I'm not saying like, hey, you can tell me you robbed a bank and I'm going to love you and hug you and tell you it's all going to be okay. I'm not saying that.
Creates other problems. Yeah,
it does. But the second question is, tell me something you failed at today. Or tell me something you're not proud of that happened today. Tell me a challenge that you had and how you overcame it, right? Now, here's what I want out of that. I want to get my kids very used to the fact that failure is a part of success. The biggest failure is not risking anything and sitting on the sidelines of life. And that's not the way we're wired. And I say we as in like Team Hagner, right? Our family. So like, I want to know like, hey, what'd you fail at today? Was it a test? Did you try to kick the ball into the goal and it didn't go in? Or were you the goalie and got a few past you? Like, what was it? And my kids might be like, Dad, I failed the science test. Now, here's what I do in that moment. Am I happy about the failed science test? Of course not. But what I really want is for them to learn. An F is going to happen, but did they learn? So what I'll do is I'll first praise them for the courage of telling me. And I'll be like, ooh, dude, that took a lot of courage to tell me, huh? Be like, so tell me about it. What happened? And in that voice tone, because you can decimate whether or not they're going to tell you anything more just by your tonality.
Yep.
So if you're like, an F on the science test? What do you mean you got an F on the science test? We don't get Fs in this house. Were you not prepared? Did you not study? I knew you were on that phone. Whether or not that stuff is true or not, your kid is like, all right, I'm not telling you anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're and as far as when I'm 17 and I might have tried alcohol for the first time, I'll get behind the wheel. I'm not running on this wrist.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, well, tell me what happened. I'll be like, yeah, there were some questions on the test I wasn't really expecting. And be like, okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that you studied as much as you possibly could, or was there anything left on the table? Like, yeah, I really didn't study as much as I should have. Well, you know what? That's a good learning. So if you were to do this all over again, what would you do different? Be like, man, I would have studied on Monday, on Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then on Thursday I would have reviewed. And then I think I would have been ready for the test. I'd be like, well, that's a pretty good lesson. So when's your next test? I'd be like, well, I have another one next Friday. So, well, based on what you've learned, what are you going to do different? Like, well, I think I'm going to do what I just told you. I think that's a great idea. And basically I just ask them after that, like, well, do you need any support? Like, do you want me to hold you accountable? Do you want me to help you study? Like, what do you got? Like, no, I think I got it. I'd be like, okay. And then of course on Friday, like, hey, how'd it go? It went great. So what I do in that moment is that is not the absence of consequences.
Mm-hmm.
That kid is still going to have to sacrifice time, to study and all that other good stuff. And if it becomes a habit or a pattern, that's something a little different. You got to address that a little bit differently. But what I'm really wanting is, what'd you fail at? What'd you learn? What are you doing different? And I want to have that tonality of like, keep going. Tell me more. I'm not going to blast you. Right. And that allows that room for like, I mean, dude, I can't even tell you how many times my boys have come to me and it's been really, really hard news, like something bad, right? And then the third question is this: what are you most excited about tomorrow? I call that one the Netflix to be continued. I'm a huge fan of Yellowstone, right? And I'm in season 5 right now. I haven't watched it, and I'm in season 5. And my wife and I were always like, God, let's just watch the first 5 minutes of the next episode, just see what happens. And then you're like 3 more episodes deep because it's got that hook point, right? Yep. It's got that hook. So that what are you most excited about tomorrow is your hook point. Because like if my son says, dude, Dad, tomorrow I've got baseball tryouts and I'm so excited about it. So what do you think I'm going to ask him as soon as he gets home? Be like, dude, how was tryouts, man? I know you were pumped about it yesterday. What happened? Tell me. Well, suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, like he remembers. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just like, let me check the box and just ask these questions. It's like, you're genuinely interested. You're doing life with me. And that's what those 3 questions will do.
Yep. There's definitely a follow through. That's a big deal. So those are 3 really good questions. I recommend anyone out there listening to go back and maybe jot those down, because they all have really, really good intentions behind it. And that will help you. I mean, that right there will elevate your game, no matter where you're at with your kids at this point. And, I'm there with you where I'm nowhere near perfect, but I've had some times, especially recently, we had some situations that could have gone really, really poorly, that I got a phone call. And the way my phone is set up is after, I think it's 9 or 9:30, the only phone calls that come through are my kids and my wife. And that's it. It's all do not disturb. And so I know if I'm getting a call from one of my adult children, or even if it's the teenagers that are out, they need me. And so I've made that very clear to them, and that's just kind of how things have gone. But yeah, it's definitely no emotion. Like, you can't be emotional at that moment, no matter how much you want to be emotional. You just snap into action and you take care of them, make sure that they're well. In this case with the science test, but other cases where it could be literal life or death situations, don't get upset, because what's that going to help? At that moment, what are you going to teach them? You're not going to teach them anything, to be honest with you.
True.
They're except for they can't go to dad. And so that's one of the things too that hurts is when, you ask them later, like, hey, how come you didn't talk to me about this? I don't like talking to you about those things. It's like, all right, well, that stings. It's kind of like the hands in the face, like, don't hit me kind of deal. That'll hurt you to the core, So those are really good questions, and it's definitely a great way to open up that communication with your kids. The other thing too, like setting up time with your kids where you work from home. Obviously, you've got your schedule pretty dialed, I imagine. But sometimes, like on Friday, Utah's schools are weird, dude. I swear, it's like they expect one parent to be home, and I think that's just an old school thing. They're used to having, I don't know if it was the multiple women, I don't know, but someone was always home. And I joke about that, guys. I'm Mormon. I can joke about this, right? But it's weird because Fridays they get like Wednesdays late start for high school, so they don't have to go in until like 9 or 10. And I'm like, okay, well, what if they don't have a ride? What if both parents work? And then Friday, like the elementary school gets home at like 1:30. I'm like, dude, I'm not even halfway through my work day. Like, and so anyway, I've set boundaries with my kids. I'm like, unless it's an emergency, I still have to work until 4:30 or whatever, 5 o'clock. Go entertain yourself. We've got amazing neighbors. Let me know where you're going, kind of deal. But anyway, it's the open communication has helped because the kids don't just come in and see me on the phone or on the laptop or whatever and think that I'm ignoring them. They know Dad's working. And the other thing too, you've got younger kids. Do you watch Bluey at all?
I don't.
Oh no.
I don't know if I don't think they do either.
So I'm not a big fan of a lot of the younger cartoons. A lot of them teach kind of some attitudes towards adults and things like that. But there's one show called Bluey that it's an Australian. They're Australian, like they're blue and orange dogs. I can't remember what their breed is, like Australian shepherds or whatever. But it's a mom and a dad and two younger kids they're both girls. And there's a lesson that I learned in there. I'm like, wow, I'm getting taught by cartoons over here. But the dad tells one of the daughters, because the daughter kept coming to him like, dad, and he's on the phone or he's doing something, the dad, and that just gets under your skin. He's like, look, next time, if I'm in the middle of an adult conversation, come up to me, put your hand on my arm or my shoulder, and that way I know you need my attention, and I will put my hand back on top of your hand to let you know I know you're there. I'll get to you in a minute, kind of deal, instead of interrupting the conversation and shifting. Now my 9-year-old, who is the one that is generally the culprit of the dad kind of deal, he'll do that now because we talked about that. I'm like, that's a great idea. He's like, Dad, you learned that from Bluey, didn't you? I said, I might have seen a clip, but it works.
I search YouTube all day long on Bluey episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's all I do is binge Bluey episodes all day. But it's little things like that, just finding little ways. Like that's a me and Asher deal. Like none of my other kids do that. It's me and him, because that's one way, and it has solved so many issues. Just that little thing, that open communication of, I know you're here. Let me finish this thing, and that also teaches him like not to interrupt. This is an important conversation between your mom and I or whoever. I'll get to you in 1 second, right? So no one's bleeding, no one's dying. It's okay to wait a second, kind of deal, right?
It is.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, that open communication. I can't harp on that enough. Again, I'm not perfect at it. You've had decades of learning that as well, but it's something that I recommend for anyone to start today. It can only get better. It can only go up.
I agree. And I want to hit one more point home before everybody thinks I'm a softie, because I'm not. But I believe in natural consequences. So like, for instance, my oldest son, we had a one-on-one date. I don't know, it was about a year ago. And I like to take the boys out just one-on-one when I can. And I always like to, again, a generative question. We're sitting there at dinner, and I like to ask this question, which is, I told my son, I said, hey, Ethan, I said, I'm going to ask you a question, and I have zero agenda. I have no idea what you're going to tell me, and I'm not baiting you for anything. I was like, I'm just want a conversation with you. I said, is there anything that you want to share with me that you haven't shared with me, or something you think I might not understand? And I knew immediately. He was just like, kind of like one of those, right? And so, long story short, he had been sick. He got COVID like around this time last year and was out of school for 5 days and really fell behind horribly in school. And he had 2 Fs. And he does good in school, so like that was pretty abnormal, and had like 7 missing assignments. And there's a part of me as a dad, and he told me that. I was just like, and I had seen him like on his phone and like wasting time, and I had no idea this was going on. And there's that part of me as a dad that I just wanted to like blast him and be like, dude, what are you thinking, man? Like, I've seen you, but I was like, that's not effective. So I was like, oh, tell me more about that. And genuinely, like, he's like, Dad, he's like, I'm so overwhelmed. He's like, I cannot keep up. He's like, I'll get 4 assignments done, and then I'll get 4 more, and then I'll get 3 done and get 5 more. He's like, I cannot catch up to save my life. And I was like, he's like, I'm working all the time. I'm super stressed out. And I looked at him. I was like, man, thanks for telling me that. That's a lot of courage. I was like, Ethan, you were sick last semester for like 4 days, and the same thing happened. I was like, what'd you do then? And you could tell and that's a generative question. Search for the past for successes and re-implement if necessary. And he's like, yeah, it was. He's like, yeah. I was like, so what did you do? He goes, I got up 30 minutes early. I stayed up an hour later than what I normally do to get the stuff done. He's like, and then for 3 straight days, it sucked, but I went into the auditorium for lunch, put in my AirPods, ate lunch by myself, and just hammered out as much as I could. And I looked at him and I was like, have you done that for this? And he's like, I haven't. And I was like, what's stopping you from doing that? He's like, oh my God, nothing. Like, I'm going to do that. So here's what I'll tell you. Just because I don't, and there are sometimes I inflict consequences, but normally I don't have to, because those natural consequences, like he's losing sleep, he's getting up early, and he's eating lunch in solitude, in the auditorium with none of his friends around, hammering out assignments that he doesn't want to do. So, and I was just like, hey, I think that's a great idea. Go do that. He came home, not the next day, but the day after that, just beaming, like, guess what? And I was like, I think I know what you're going to tell me, but what is it? I got it all done. I'm all caught up. I don't have F's anymore. They're up to C's. Like, I'm all caught up. And I was like, dude, your plan worked. Great job. Right. So just because we as parents don't inflict consequences, that doesn't mean they're not paying in some way, shape, or form. Now, if that became like a habitual thing,
right,
and there might be more action to be taken, but I didn't have to. Like, he was already paying the price. So I want to clarify that too.
And you allowed him to problem solve. He had already kind of found a solution himself, and that's going to teach him in the future too, as well, with jobs, and whether he chooses to be an entrepreneur, a 9-to-5 business owner, whatever. That's going to teach him as well. Like, hey, it's going to kind of suck if you need to take time off. So either get caught up ahead of time, or understand that when you come back from a vacation or being sick or whatever, you know what to do now. You have to go eat in solitude and figure it out, the next couple of days. That's a really cool story. And I'd agree that it's hard to let the natural consequences fall sometimes, because we just want to solve things now. And I also I kind of do understand this, again, the ego, but as parents, you don't want to see your kids fail. And some of that I see some parents not wanting their kids to fail in sports or whatever, because it's a direct reflection of them, they feel like, when it's really not.
Right.
It's not, but it's hard to get that through people's heads. And it's hard to understand that myself sometimes as well, that I need to take a step back. And even though I know other people and other parents are out there judging the fact that my kid didn't do this one thing and thinking how horrible of a parent I may be, but I know the reality. And that's what matters the most, is that what you're doing and you're letting the process happen, rather than just trying to fix everything, because that doesn't solve issues. And that just creates, in your case with all boys, or, it seems to be pretty prevalent among young men, but it creates man children, where they're in your house, in your basement, they can't figure out real things. They get addicted to video games, whatever it may be. because they don't get the dopamine rush that your son got from solving his own problems.
Right.
And
Exactly.
conquering his dragons, saving the princess, whatever you want to relate it to. Young men especially nowadays need that. They earn that dopamine rush by doing the hard things, such as conquering the schoolwork that they didn't want to do. Getting things like that done, rather than dad coming in and fixing the issue and emailing the teacher and saying, well, he had COVID, so can he get a pass, kind of deal. You let him work through that. And he, again, came to you and celebrated with you because he felt good about that. He accomplished something. He created something that he wouldn't have created if you had stepped in and fixed it for him.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I love like challenging the kids to problem solve, because I think if we serve up the solution on a silver platter, we're really doing them an injustice. Which, by the way, one thing you brought up, it's not about the nail, right? Which, by the way, you'll never unsee this. Have you seen the movie Maverick?
Yes.
Okay. The girl in that video is Phoenix.
Oh man.
Yeah. You want to see that one now. So, which is funny because that video was created in 2013. So that was before she was a star. And now she's like, she can basically write her own ticket anywhere since she was in one of the biggest movies ever. But,
that's awesome.
What I always like to, and I think this is one, if we could squeeze in one other lesson just that I've had to learn the hard way, is that as much as we want to fix it, right, for our kids and for our wives. First of all, our wives and our kids, doesn't matter if you have a boy or a girl, 3 basic needs: seen, heard, safe. Seen, heard, and safe. Okay, that's what they need. If you are automatically go into solution mode, they don't feel seen and they don't feel heard. The best thing you can actually do is become brilliant at asking questions. Because if you don't view yourself as the problem solver, view yourself as the guide to get them to solve their own problem. That's it. And by doing so, just ask questions. Now, there are going to be times where they're going to be like, and I even do this with my own dad because my own dad does this to me. And I'll be like, can you not ask me any more questions? Just tell me what you would do. And we laugh about it. I'm like, I appreciate what you're doing, but just give me your advice. Okay. And there's a time and a place for that. But it's so empowering that if you can just simply be the guide that, your kids can bounce their ideas off of, and the potential solutions off of, versus like fixing it, you're going to raise a critical thinker.
Right.
You're going to raise someone who can actually make decisions, right, based on the reps that you've given them. If you serve up solutions on a silver platter, you're not giving your kids that experience. And then they're going to, when they're adults, and be like, what do you think we should do about this problem? Be like, I don't really know. Because they've had their entire childhood of someone fixing it for them or telling them what they should do.
Yeah.
And again, time and a place for that. But the more often you can be that guide and just simply get really good at asking really curious questions, man, the better they're going to be. And here's the funny thing is too, I can't even tell you, man, like how many times be like, Dad, you helped me so much. Thank you so much for your help. And I'm sitting there thinking like, I did not. Dude, you literally
like,
did all this yourself, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always tell them that too. I'm like, I didn't do anything. This is all your idea. All I did was ask you a few questions. You came up with everything yourself.
Yeah. And there's I can't remember exactly what it's linked to, but going back to, and Huberman brought this up about, there's a part of your brain that literally actively grows and shrinks throughout your life based on doing things that are hard that you don't want to do. And if you do the hard thing that you don't want to do, it grows. And then if you are basically weak about it, if you just kind of let it go and people provide these solutions and do things for you, or you just kind of coast through life, that part shrinks. And I know there's specific hormones, good things that particular part of the brain is linked to, but they've shown that happens. So you being an active participant in that, I mean, yeah, we're asking questions, but you're also you're providing those questions. So now your kids eventually will ask themselves those questions when they hit those issues. You're providing that, whereas otherwise they don't know what questions to ask. They're kind of stuck. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So that's definitely I'd say it's an inactive help, even though you didn't physically do something for them. You provided them with the tools. You gave them the tool belt and said, go solve the issue. It's like, I feel like too many times where parents are easily handing over screen time, just giving screens to the kids just so that they can get them out of their hair. For me, like I said, on those Fridays, I'll tell my kids, I'm like, we'll go down a list of friends, and I won't say the order in case those parents are listening to the podcast and know where they're at on that list. But we've got a continual list of people that I will send out text on Fridays. Like Asher will come to me, hey, can you text so-and-so and see if they can play? Because they know that now, like, I don't give them screen time. They can go play Legos. They have plenty of other toys. They've got a backyard. They've got friends. They've got stuff they can do outside of just screen time. So, but yeah, no, with that being said, okay, well, we're going to end it there, guys. So again, Larry, I appreciate you hopping on. Thank you so much for that. And guys, if you haven't checked out his podcast, where can they find you at, Larry?
Just the Dad Edge. I think if you Google the Dad Edge, everything will pop up. The podcast is on every channel imaginable. And then thedadedge.com is where you can find everything we're doing. Instagram is the Dad Edge. Facebook is the Dad Edge. Pretty much those 3 words you'll be able to find me pretty easily.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, I will leave the links down below, guys, where you can find Larry and his crew. Definitely go check it out. It's been awesome listening in, and we might have to do a part 2 later. So that being said, guys,
love it, man.
Like I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.
Thank you guys for tuning in to this conversation that I had with Larry. He is just, again, an amazing guy. Hopefully you gained some golden nuggets out of this conversation that you can learn and improve on in your own life as you become the best version of yourself, being a dad, husband, and a man in general. In this day and age, we need strong men that are willing to do what needs to be done to take care of the kids, take care of the family, but also better society in general. So hopefully you learned from that. I'm going to leave the links down below where you can find Larry and all of his offerings that he has for you to be able to learn more from him and his groups. Also, guys, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate the growth that we're having, and let's continue to grow. Share this podcast with other people. Tag me in it on social media. Be more than happy to reshare that. I really appreciate the growth that we're having. And also, of course, on the audio-only platforms, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it may be, click that follow button or the subscribe button, whatever button it is that will alert you that more podcasts are coming out. And on top of that, leave a review. It is a very quick, easy, and free way for you to support the channel. Definitely appreciate that. Last but not least, guys, here's a win-win-win for all of us, okay? If you are looking to get in the market for some gear or anything like that, anything that I've used on the channel, outdoorsy, family related, nutrition related, and you want to save some money, check out the description down below. Support the partners of the show with getting a discount for yourself. So saving money on gear you're already going to purchase, supporting the partners of the show, and in turn supporting me here at the channel so we can continue to bring amazing guests on like today with Larry, bring you some awesome gear items that you may want to see, and of course, continue to up the content for you guys as well. So really appreciate all of that, whether it's the free support or the monetary support or both. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it, guys. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.